Everyone in the room held their breath. They expected screaming. They expected tears. They expected Isabella to fight for every penny of the sterling fortune. Instead, she picked up the pen, signed the divorce papers with a terrifying calmness, and walked out into the rain without a coat. Her husband, Preston, laughed. He thought he had won. He thought he had discarded a gold digger to make room for his new life. He had no idea that the woman he just cast aside wasn't walking to a bus stop. She was walking toward a tarmac where a $65 million Bombardier Global 7500 was waiting, engines running, ready to take her back to the life she had hidden from him for 5 years. He didn't sign a divorce decree. He signed his own death warrant. The conference room on the 42nd floor of the monolithic generic glass tower in downtown Manhattan smelled of stale coffee and expensive leather. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, blurring the grey skyline into a watercolor of misery. Inside, the air conditioning was set to a freezing temperature, a subtle psychological tactic Preston Sterling liked to use during negotiations. He wanted his opponents shivering. But Isabella wasn't shivering. She sat on the edge of the mahogany chair, her posture perfect, her hands folded in her lap. She wore a faded beige cardigan over a simple white dress that Preston had once called quaint when they were dating, and embarrassing once they were married. "Isabella, we don't have all day." Preston sighed, checking his Patek Philippe Nautilus watch. He made a show of adjusting the cuff of his bespoke Italian suit. "My lawyers have explained the terms. It's a clean break. You get the apartment in Queens, the 2018 Honda, and a lump sum of $50,000. In exchange, you waive all rights to Sterling Dynamics, the patent portfolio, and the Hamptons estate." Sitting next to Preston was his lawyer, Arthur Caldwell. Arthur was a shark in a three-piece suit, known for shredding spouses in court. He pushed the thick stack of documents across the table toward Isabella. The paper made a harsh sliding sound against the wood. "Mrs. Sterling," Arthur said, his voice oily and patronizing, "I strongly advise you to sign. If we go to trial, Preston's forensic accountants will ensure the legal fees bankrupt you before you even step foot in a courtroom. This is generosity." Preston smirked. He didn't look at her eyes. He looked at the pen sitting next to the document. He just wanted the signature. Sterling Dynamics was on the verge of a massive merger with the mysterious Titan Aviation Group. The board had made it clear Preston needed to be single and scandal-free to close the deal. A messy divorce would spook the investors. He needed Isabella gone, quietly. "Generosity," Isabella repeated softly. Her voice was steady, lacking the tremor Preston had hoped for. "Yes." "Generosity," Preston snapped. "Look, Bella, let's be real. You were a barista when I found you. I gave you 5 years of luxury. You didn't fit in. You never tried to fit in. Tiffany understands this world. She understands the pressure I'm under." The mention of the name hung in the air. Tiffany. The 22-year-old PR intern, Preston, had been mentoring for the past 6 months. The woman wearing the diamond earrings Isabella had noticed missing from her jewelry box last Christmas. Isabella reached into her purse. Preston tensed, half expecting her to pull out a phone with incriminating photos or a counteroffer. Instead, she pulled out a cheap plastic ballpoint pen. "I don't want the money, Preston," she said. Arthur, the lawyer, blinked. "Excuse me. I don't want the 50,000. I don't want the apartment in Queens. You can keep the Honda." Preston laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Trying to play the martyr? Or are you holding out for millions? Because you signed a prenup, sweetie. You get what I give you." "I don't want your money because it's dirty, Preston," Isabella said, uncapping the pen. "And I don't need it." "You have nothing!" Preston slammed his hand on the table. Without me, you're back to pouring lattes. Just sign the damn papers." Isabella looked up then. For the first time, Preston saw something in her brown eyes that unsettled him. It wasn't sadness, it wasn't anger. It was pity. Cold, detached pity. She flipped to the final page. She didn't read the clauses. She didn't consult a lawyer of her own. She simply pressed the pen to the paper. Isabella Sterling. The signature was fluid and elegant. She closed the folder and pushed it back toward Arthur. "It's done," she said, standing up. Finally, Preston exhaled, snatching the papers to verify the signature. "You made the right choice, Bella. Don't worry. I'll have my driver drop you off at the bus station. I'm not a monster." "That won't be necessary," Isabella said. She walked to the door. Her movements were graceful, almost regal, a sharp contrast to the drab clothes she wore. "Where are you going to go?" Preston called out, a final jab of cruelty as he tucked the papers into his briefcase. "It's raining, and you don't even have an umbrella." Isabella paused with her hand on the brass doorknob. She didn't turn back. "I'm going home, Preston. Somewhere the air doesn't smell like greed." She opened the door and vanished into the hallway. Preston turned to Arthur, a triumphant grin spreading across his face. "That was easier than I thought. She didn't even ask for alimony. What a fool!" Arthur frowned, looking at the door where she had just exited. "I don't know, Preston. She was too quiet. Usually they scream. Usually they beg. That felt different. Who cares?" Preston stood up and buttoned his jacket. "Call the board. Tell them the loose end is tied up. We're free to pursue the Titan aviation deal. I'm going to be a billionaire, Arthur. And Isabella? She'll be serving coffee by next week." The rain outside the law firm was torrential, a grey curtain drowning New York City. Isabella walked out of the building's revolving doors. The doorman, a kind older man named Henry, whom she had always tipped well, often with money she saved from her grocery allowance, rushed forward with an umbrella. "Mrs. Sterling, please, let me call you a cab," Henry said, looking concerned at her thin cardigan. Isabella smiled warmly, a genuine expression that transformed her face. "Thank you, Henry. But I have a ride. And please call me Isabella. The name Sterling doesn't belong to me anymore." She stepped past him, not toward the line of yellow taxis, but toward a black curb where a vehicle had just pulled up. It wasn't a town car or a ride-share. It was a matte black Mercedes Maybach S-Class, the windows tinted so dark they looked like onyx. Henry's jaw dropped. He knew cars. He knew that specific car cost more than the entire lobby he worked in. The rear door opened, not by a driver, but from the inside. A man in a sharp charcoal suit stepped out, holding a large, wind-resistant umbrella. He was tall, with silver hair and the bearing of a man who had commanded armies or boardrooms. This was Sebastian Cole, a man whose face had graced the cover of Forbes and the Wall Street Journal, usually accompanied by headlines about hostile takeovers. He held the umbrella over Isabella, shielding her completely from the downpour, while he let the rain soak his own expensive suit. "You're late, Bella," Sebastian said, though his tone was affectionate. "Negotiations took longer than expected. He likes to hear himself talk," Isabella replied, sliding into the back seat of the Maybach. Sebastian closed the door and got in the other side. As the car pulled away, gliding silently into the chaotic traffic, the interior was a sanctuary of warm light and soft jazz. "Did he sign?" Sebastian asked, opening a crystal decanter and pouring a glass of sparkling water for her. "He did. He thinks he won." Isabella took the glass, her hand steady. She looked out the window at the city passing by. "He thinks I'm going to a bus station. He has no idea who he was living with for 5 years, does he?" Sebastian shook his head. I still don't understand why you did it, Bella. Why you let him treat you like that. You, the heiress to the Valenti fortune. You, the silent majority shareholder of Titan Aviation. Isabella sighed, leaning her head back against the leather headrest. I wanted to be loved, Sebastian. Not for the money. Not for the planes. Not for the power. I wanted to see if a man could love Isabella, the girl from the library. When I met Preston, he was charming. He was ambitious. I thought we could build something. And then he got a taste of success, small success, and it rotted him from the inside out. He didn't want a partner. He wanted a prop. I stayed hoping he would change back, but today he mocked my coat while wearing a suit I secretly paid for 3 years ago when his company was about to default on payroll. Sebastian chuckled darkly. He has no clue you bailed Sterling Dynamics out in 2023. None. He thinks he's a genius businessman. He thinks he's merging with Titan Aviation because of his brilliant tech. He doesn't know Titan Aviation is me. The car turned onto the highway, heading toward Teterboro Airport. So, Sebastian said, his eyes gleaming with a mix of protectiveness and anticipation. The gala is in 3 days, the Titan-Sterling merger signing ceremony. He's expecting to meet the CEO of Titan. He is, Isabella said, a small, cold smile touching her lips. He's expecting a 70-year-old German man named Gunther. That's the dummy profile we set up. He's going to be very surprised when you walk into that hangar, Sebastian noted. He wanted a divorce, Sebastian. He wanted me out of his life so he could ascend to the Billionaires Club. I'm just going to grant his wish. I'm going to show him exactly what the Billionaires Club looks like. Isabella pulled a phone from her purse. Not the cracked iPhone 8 she used around Preston, but a sleek, secure satellite phone. She dialed a number. Captain, she said into the phone. Prepare the Global 7500. We're heading to Zurich for the board meeting, then back for the gala. And tell the crew to stock the vintage Dom Perignon. We have a divorce to celebrate. Meanwhile, back in the high-rise, Preston Sterling was popping a bottle of champagne, though it was merely Moet, not the vintage stock Isabella was accustomed to. Tiffany squealed, spinning around in the office chair. So she's gone, like gone. Signed, sealed and delivered, Preston declared, leaning back with his feet on the desk. She didn't even fight. It was pathetic, really. I almost felt bad for her. She has zero survival instinct. She was dragging you down, baby, Tiffany cooed, walking over to massage his shoulders. You're a shark. You need someone who can swim with you, not some mouse. Exactly, Preston agreed. Now, we focus on the big prize, the Titan Aviation deal. Their CIO sent over the itinerary for the final signing. It's happening this Saturday. They're hosting it at a private hangar at JFK. Very hush-hush, very exclusive. Are you going to take me? Tiffany asked, batting her eyelashes. Preston hesitated. It's a business meeting, Tiff. But I suppose the future Mrs. Sterling should make an entrance. Yes. Buy a dress, something expensive. I want Titan to see that Sterling Dynamics is a luxury brand. He looked out the window at the rain. Somewhere out there, he imagined Isabella sitting on a Greyhound bus, wet and miserable. Good riddance, he whispered to the glass. He didn't notice the black notification on his computer screen, a market alert he had set up years ago, but rarely checked. It was a fluctuation in his own company's stock ownership. A massive block of shares, previously held by a shell corporation, had just been transferred to a holding company called Nemesis LLC. If Preston had clicked on it, he might have seen the name of the LLC's director, but he was too busy pouring another glass of champagne. The silence Isabella left behind wasn't empty. It was the calm before the storm, and the storm was coming in a jet that could fly at Mach 0.925. The Bombardier Global 7500 climbed through 30,000 feet, punching through the storm clouds that blanketed New York and emerging into the blinding, pristine sunlight of the upper atmosphere. Inside the cabin, the silence was absolute, save for the soft clink of crystal against crystal. Isabella stood in the center of the cabin. The poor wife facade was shedding like a snake's skin. She pulled off the pilled beige cardigan she had worn to the lawyer's office and dropped it onto the plush, hand-stitched carpet. Next, she unzipped the simple white dress. Underneath, she wasn't wearing the cotton basics Preston assumed she bought at discount stores. She wore silk lingerie from La Perla, a small, secret rebellion she had kept for herself. "Claire," Isabella called out softly. A flight attendant in a crisp navy uniform appeared instantly from the galley. "Yes, Miss Valenti." Or is it back to Miss Valenti now? "It is," Isabella smiled, though her eyes were tired. "Burn this dress, please, and the cardigan. I don't want to see them again." "With pleasure, ma'am." Claire picked up the clothes as if they were contaminated waste. "Your wardrobe has been prepared in the master suite. We have the outfits for the Zurich board meeting." Isabella walked toward the rear of the jet. This wasn't just a plane, it was a flying palace. It featured a full bedroom with a queen-sized bed, a dining area for 6, and a cinema room. It was the flagship of the Titan aviation fleet, the very company Preston was desperate to merge with. She entered the bathroom, turning on the gold-plated faucet to splash water on her face. She looked in the mirror. For 5 years, she had played the role of Isabella Sterling, the struggling orphan who should be grateful for Preston's attention. She had cooked his meals, cleaned his messes, and listened to his condescending lectures on business. "You wouldn't understand, Bella. It's high-level economics." She scoffed at the memory. Preston didn't know that while he was struggling to understand a balance sheet, she was silently directing the movement of billions of euros through her family's trust, the Valenti estate. She had hidden her identity not to trick him, but to protect herself. Her father, the late Lorenzo Valenti, had warned her on his deathbed. "They will love the jet, Bella. They will love the money. Find someone who loves the girl who likes to paint watercolors." She thought Preston was that man. She was wrong. She emerged from the suite 20 minutes later, transformed. She wore a tailored power suit in charcoal grey, cut sharply to accentuate her waist, and stilettos that clicked with authority on the floor. Her hair, previously tied back in a messy bun, now cascaded in glossy waves around her shoulders. She put on a pair of vintage Cartier sunglasses, even though she was indoors. Sebastian was sitting in the conference area, reviewing documents on a tablet. He looked up and nodded. "The butterfly emerges." "Update me on Zurich," Isabella commanded, sitting across from him. Her voice had dropped an octave. It was no longer soft and submissive. It was the voice of a CEO. "The board is restless," Sebastian reported. "The merger with Sterling Dynamics is the only thing keeping them calm. They think acquiring Sterling's battery patent is essential for our new line of electric cargo drones. They don't know that the battery patent is actually flawed." Isabella raised an eyebrow. "Flawed?" "Yes. Preston cooked the books on the test results. The batteries overheat at high altitudes. If we merge, Titan buys a lawsuit waiting to happen." "I know," Isabella said calmly, taking a sip of the vintage Dom Perignon Claire had poured. "I saw the real data on his laptop 3 months ago while he was sleeping. I tried to warn him. I told him, 'Preston, maybe you should retest the thermal output.' He told me to stick to laundry." Sebastian winced. "So, why are we proceeding with the signing ceremony?" "We aren't merging, Sebastian," Isabella said, her eyes cold behind the dark glasses. "We are acquiring. Hostile takeover. There's a clause in the initial agreement Preston signed without reading, Section 14, Paragraph B. It states that if Sterling Dynamics misrepresents any technical data, Titan has the right to buy controlling interest at a penalized rate. Sebastian's eyes widened. You're going to invoke Clause 14? That will strip him of his company. He'll be left with nothing but his title, and even that will be ceremonial. He wanted a clean break, Isabella said, staring out the window at the Atlantic Ocean far below. He wanted to be a billionaire. I'm going to show him that there are levels to this game. He's playing checkers, Sebastian. I'm playing three-dimensional chess. The jet banked smoothly, adjusting course for Switzerland. Meanwhile, on the ground in New York, Preston was having a very different afternoon. He was standing in the middle of his penthouse living room, shouting at his phone. What do you mean the caterer cancelled? I paid the deposit. On the other end of the line, the catering manager sounded bored. Mr. Sterling, the card on file was declined. We tried to run the remaining balance for the pre-gala dinner, and it bounced. Bounced? That's impossible, Preston yelled, his face turning red. I have a credit limit of $50,000 on that card. Declined, sir. We need a wire transfer within the hour, or no shrimp cocktail. Preston hung up, furious. He logged into his banking app. His eyes bulged. His personal checking account, which usually held a comfortable buffer, was overdrawn. Tiffany! He screamed. Tiffany walked in from the bedroom, wearing a silk robe she had bought with his card that morning. What's wrong, baby? You're ruining my vibe. Did you buy something? A car? A house? My account is empty. Tiffany shrugged, examining her freshly manicured nails. I just bought the dress for the gala, and maybe a few accessories. You said you wanted me to look expensive. I said look expensive, not bankrupt me. Preston rubbed his temples. He was cash poor. All his wealth was tied up in Sterling Dynamics stock, which he couldn't liquidate until after the merger. He was living on credit, banking on the payout from Titan Aviation to clear his debts. Don't worry, Tiffany soothed, walking over and kissing his cheek. In 3 days you'll be worth billions. Who cares about a few $1,000s now? Just use another card. Preston exhaled, his anxiety spiking. She was right. The merger. It was the lifeline. He just had to make it to Saturday. You're right, he muttered. I'm just stressed. The CEO of Titan is coming. Gunther. They say he's a hard man to please. You'll charm him, Tiffany said. You always win. Preston looked at the rain lashing against his penthouse window. For a second, he wondered where Isabella was. He pictured her in a cramped apartment in Queens, probably crying over a microwave dinner. The thought made him feel better. He had upgraded. He was winning. He had no idea that at that exact moment, the woman he pictured eating microwave macaroni was eating caviar at 45,000 feet, plotting the destruction of his empire. Zurich was cold and efficient. The meeting at the Valenti headquarters, a brutalist stone building overlooking the lake, lasted 6 hours. Isabella sat at the head of a table made of black marble, surrounded by 12 men in grey suits who controlled the European aviation market. She didn't flinch. She tore through the agenda, approved the quarterly budget, and then dropped the file regarding Sterling Dynamics on the table. The acquisition proceeds, she told the board, but under the distress protocol. A board member, a skeptical Swiss banker named Hans, raised a hand. Ms. Valenti, are we sure about this? Preston Sterling is volatile. If he realizes we are initiating a hostile takeover instead of a partnership, he might pull the patent. He can't, Isabella said, tapping the file. He leveraged the patent as collateral for his personal loans that we bought through our subsidiary bank yesterday. The room went silent. The board members exchanged looks of terrified respect. She hadn't just outsmarted Preston, she had encircled him. She owned his debt, she owned his partner, and soon she would own his company. "Prepare the jet," Isabella said, standing up. "We return to New York tonight. I have a gala to attend." Saturday night, JFK Airport, Private Hangar 4. The atmosphere was electric. The hangar had been transformed into a ballroom. Massive chandeliers hung from the industrial ceiling beams, casting a golden glow over the polished concrete floor. A string quartet played softly in the corner, competing with the hum of excitement from New York's elite. There were tech moguls, Wall Street sharks, and socialites. And in the center of it all, Preston Sterling held court. He looked impeccable in a tuxedo, though the smile on his face was tight. He was sweating slightly. He had spent the last of his available cash to rent a Lamborghini for the night to impress the Titan executives. Tiffany hung on his arm, wearing a dress that was perhaps a bit too loud, a sequined red gown with a slit that went up to her hip. She was drinking champagne too fast, her laughter shrill and echoing in the large space. "So, where is this Gunther?" Tiffany asked loudly, looking around. "Is he the old guy over there with the monocle?" "Keep your voice down," Preston hissed. "He's not here yet. The Titan delegation is arriving by jet. They're taxiing directly to the hangar door. That's how these people travel." Arthur, Preston's lawyer, walked up, looking nervous. He pulled Preston aside. "Preston, there's something weird going on," Arthur whispered, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. "I tried to confirm the final contract language with Titan's legal team this morning, but they ghosted me. And I'm seeing people here. People who shouldn't be here." "Who?" Preston asked, annoyed. "See that man by the bar? That's the VP of Acquisitions for Valenti Heavy Industries. And over there? That's the head of the SEC's Oversight Committee. This doesn't look like a merger party, Preston. It looks like an audit." "You're paranoid," Preston scoffed, adjusting his bow tie. "They're here to celebrate my genius. Titan is a massive conglomerate. Of course, they brought their heavy hitters." Suddenly, the lights in the hangar dimmed. The chatter died down. The massive hangar doors at the far end of the room began to rumble. Slowly, the metal doors parted, revealing the night sky. The rain had stopped, leaving the tarmac glistening under the floodlights. A hush fell over the crowd as a plane taxied into view. It wasn't just any plane. It was the Bombardier Global 7500, painted in a deep midnight blue with the Titan Aviation logo, a silver falcon, emblazoned on the tail. It was sleek, predatory, and undeniably expensive. The engines whined down, a high-pitched sound that vibrated in everyone's chest. "Here we go," Preston said, straightening his jacket. He grabbed Tiffany's hand. "Smile. We are about to meet our destiny." A mobile staircase was driven up to the jet's door. The crowd moved forward, forming a semicircle, eager to see the mysterious billionaire who ran Titan Aviation. Preston positioned himself at the front, ready to offer a handshake to the elderly German man he expected. The jet door hissed open. First, a bodyguard stepped out, a massive man scanning the crowd. Then, Sebastian Cole appeared. The crowd murmured. Sebastian was a legend. If he was here, this was serious. Sebastian descended the stairs and stood at the bottom, waiting. He looked directly at Preston. There was no warmth in his eyes. "Where's Gunther?" Preston whispered to Arthur. Then, a final figure appeared in the doorway of the jet. It was a woman. The lights from the hangar caught the shimmer of her dress first. It was a custom-made gown of midnight blue velvet, matching the jet, with diamonds scattered across the bodice, like stars. It was regal, imposing, and breathtaking. She wore gloves that went up to her elbows. Her face was partially obscured by the brim of a wide, haute couture hat. But as she stepped onto the top stair, she tilted her head up. Preston felt his heart stop. He felt the blood drain from his face, leaving him dizzy. He blinked, thinking he was having a hallucination brought on by stress. It was Isabella, but it wasn't the Isabella he knew. This woman held herself with the grace of a queen and the danger of a loaded weapon. She gripped the handrail and began to descend, every step slow and deliberate. The crowd whispered, "Is that—" "No, it can't be." "Isn't that the wife?" Tiffany squinted. "Why does that woman look like your ex?" Preston couldn't speak. His mouth opened and closed like a fish. Isabella reached the bottom of the stairs. Sebastian offered her his arm. She took it, and together they walked across the tarmac, the click of her heels echoing like gunshots in the silence. She stopped 5 feet in front of Preston. The smell of her perfume, a custom blend of jasmine and oud, hit him. It was the same perfume she used to wear on their anniversaries, the one he told her was too strong. Now, it smelled like power. "Hello, Preston," she said. Her voice was amplified by the acoustics of the hangar, clear and devastating. "Bella?" Preston choked out, his voice cracking. What are you doing here? You're supposed to be in Queens. Why are you on Gunther's jet?" Isabella smiled. It was the smile of a predator who had just cornered its prey. "Gunther is a fictional character, Preston. He doesn't exist." She took a step closer, her eyes locking onto his. "I am Titan Aviation." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush him. The silence in the hangar was shattered by the sound of a single champagne glass hitting the concrete floor. It was Tiffany who dropped it. The crystal shards scattered near her red-soled shoes, but she didn't look down. She was staring at Isabella with a mixture of horror and calculation, her mind racing to process the shift in power that had just occurred in front of New York's entire financial elite. Preston laughed. It was a nervous, jagged sound that echoed uncomfortably. "Good joke, Bella," he stammered, looking around at the crowd for support. "God, you almost had me. Who put you up to this? Did you hire an actress to play the CEO? Is this some sort of revenge prank because I didn't give you alimony?" He turned to the crowd, spreading his arms wide. "Everyone, this is my ex-wife. She has a vivid imagination. She used to work at a coffee shop on 4th Street. She doesn't know the difference between a jet engine and a blender." Nobody laughed. The executives from Wall Street, the sharks who smelled blood in the water before anyone else, were already backing away from Preston. They saw the way Sebastian Cole, the most ruthless operator in the industry, was standing one step behind Isabella, deferring to her. That wasn't acting. That was hierarchy. Isabella didn't shout. She didn't make a scene. She simply signaled to Sebastian with a slight nod. Sebastian opened a black leather portfolio and produced a document. He handed it to Arthur Caldwell, Preston's sweating lawyer. "Mr. Caldwell," Sebastian said, his voice projecting easily. "I believe you are familiar with the due diligence protocol outlined in the merger agreement? Specifically, Section 14, Paragraph B." Arthur's hands shook as he took the document. He scanned the page, his face draining of color until he looked like a ghost. "The misrepresentation clause?" "Precisely," Isabella said, taking a step forward. The crowd parted for her, giving her a wide berth. Section 14 states that if Sterling Dynamics falsifies any technical data regarding the core assets, in this case, the revolutionary battery technology, Titan Aviation reserves the right to cancel the merger and trigger an immediate recall of all loans issued to Sterling Dynamics. Preston stepped in, his face flushing red. "Falsified? I didn't falsify anything. My tech is solid." "Your tech overheats at 30,000 feet, Preston," Isabella said quietly. "I told you that 3 months ago. You were too busy looking at Tiffany to listen to me. I accessed your R&D server. I saw the failed safety tests you deleted. That is fraud, Preston. Corporate fraud. A gasp went through the room. Accusations of fraud were death sentences in this crowd. You hacked me, Preston screeched. That's illegal. You were my wife. I was a concerned shareholder, Isabella corrected. You see, while you were buying Tiffany diamond earrings with company funds, I was buying Sterling Dynamics debt through a holding company. Nemesis LLC. Does that ring a bell? Preston felt the room spin. He remembered seeing the notification. He had ignored it. You own my debt? All of it, Isabella confirmed. $80 million in high-interest loans. And since you just admitted to the fraud by claiming the tech is solid when my engineers have proof it fails, I am calling in the debt. Tonight. She checked her diamond-encrusted watch. You have 24 hours to repay $80 million, Preston. If you cannot, Titan Aviation, which is to say, I, will seize all assets of Sterling Dynamics. The patents, the building, the inventory, everything. You can't do this? Preston lunged toward her, desperation making him reckless. Before he could get within 3 feet of her, the massive bodyguard who had exited the plane first intercepted him. With one fluid motion, the guard restrained Preston, twisting his arm behind his back. Preston yelped in pain, humiliated. Let him go, Isabella said calmly. The guard released him. Preston stumbled back, straightening his tuxedo, trying to regain a shred of dignity. But it was gone. Isabella looked at him with profound disappointment. I gave you a chance, Preston. This afternoon, in that conference room. I signed the papers. I asked for nothing. If you had shown 1 ounce of kindness, if you had let me leave with dignity, I might have forgiven the debt. I might have let you keep your little company. She paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. But you laughed at me. You mocked my coat. You sent me out into the rain. You wanted a shark, Preston? You got one. Isabella turned her back on him. Sebastian, have the legal team serve the foreclosure notices first thing Monday morning, and cancel the catering for this event. I'm not paying for a party to celebrate a fraud. Understood, Ms. Valenti, Sebastian said. Isabella began to walk back toward the jet. The crowd, sensing the absolute destruction of Preston Sterling, immediately turned their backs on him. They began whispering, pulling out their phones, frantically calling their brokers to dump Sterling stock before the market opened on Monday. Bella, wait! Preston shouted, his voice cracking. We can talk about this. We're family. I still love you. Isabella stopped on the stairs of the jet. She looked down at him one last time. You don't love me, Preston. You love money. And now you have neither. She disappeared into the cabin. The heavy door of the Global 7500 hissed shut, sealing her away from him. Preston stood alone in the middle of the hangar. The string quartet had stopped playing. The guests were filing out, ignoring him as if he were invisible. He turned to Tiffany. Tiff, baby, listen. It's a misunderstanding. I can fix this. I just need to call... Tiffany looked at him. The adoration in her eyes was gone, replaced by a cold, hard sneer. She pulled her arm away from his touch. 80 million in debt? She asked, her voice flat. It's just a number. I can fix it. You're broke, Preston, Tiffany said. She reached up and unclasped the diamond necklace he had given her for her birthday. For a second, Preston thought she was going to give it back to help him. Instead, she dropped it into her purse. I'm keeping this. Consider it severance pay. Where are you going? Preston asked, panic rising in his chest. I'm taking an Uber, she said, turning on her heel. My ride home just turned into a pumpkin. The descent from the stratosphere of wealth to the pavement of reality is usually fast. But for Preston Sterling, the weekend was an agonizing, slow-motion car crash. After the hangar emptied out, Preston was left with the bill for the venue rental, which his credit card promptly declined. He was forced to leave his driver's license with the angry venue manager as collateral just to leave the airport. He walked out to the rental Lamborghini. It was a beautiful car, bright yellow, a symbol of everything he wanted to be. But as he pressed the ignition button, nothing happened. The dashboard remained dark. A tow truck pulled up alongside him. The driver, a burly man named Mike, leaned out the window. "Mr. Sterling, rental agency called. They voided your contract. Invalid payment method. I got to take the car." "You have got to be kidding me," Preston whispered. "I'm in Queens. How am I supposed to get back to Manhattan?" "There's a bus stop about a mile down the road," Mike said, hooking the Lamborghini up to the winch. "Runs every 40 minutes. The irony hit Preston like a physical blow. Just that afternoon, he had mocked Isabella, telling her he'd have his driver drop her at the bus station. Now, under the glare of the airport streetlights, he began the long walk in his tuxedo shoes, which were pinching his toes. It started to rain again. When he finally reached his penthouse at 3:00 a.m., soaked and exhausted, he found that his keycard didn't work for the elevator. The doorman, a young guy named Kevin, who usually greeted him with a salute, looked at him with pity. "Sorry, Mr. Sterling. The building management got a legal notice an hour ago. Something about an asset freeze. They locked out the penthouse." "That's my house," Preston screamed, pounding on the concierge desk. "You can't lock me out of my own house." "Actually, sir," Kevin said, reading from a tablet, "the lease is in the name of Sterling Dynamics, and since the company is currently under emergency insolvency protocols, the assets are frozen. You can't go up. I have clothes up there. I have my watch collection. I can give you a gym bag with some basics they sent down," Kevin offered, handing him a generic grey duffel bag. "But you have to leave the premises." Preston grabbed the bag. He walked out of the building he had lived in for 3 years, the building where he had told Isabella she wasn't classy enough to host dinner parties. He spent the night in a cheap motel in New Jersey, the only place that would take the cash he had in his wallet. He lay on the lumpy mattress, staring at the water-stained ceiling, listening to the sirens outside. Sunday broke with a grey, unforgiving light. Preston turned on the small TV in the room. He flipped to the financial news channel. The headline on the screen made his stomach drop. "Titan Aviation exposes fraud at Sterling Dynamics. Stock plummets, 90% in pre-market trading." The news anchor was ruthless. In a shocking turn of events, the highly anticipated merger has turned into a hostile acquisition. Isabella Valenti, the reclusive heiress revealed to be the majority owner of Titan Aviation, has initiated foreclosure proceedings against Sterling Dynamics. Analysts are calling it the divorce decree of the century. They showed a clip from the night before, Isabella descending the stairs of the jet, looking like a goddess of vengeance. Then they showed a paparazzi photo of Preston, soaked in rain, arguing with the tow truck driver. The contrast was brutal. One was royalty, the other was a joke. Preston turned off the TV. He sat on the edge of the bed and put his head in his hands. His phone buzzed. It was Arthur. "Preston." Arthur's voice was devoid of its usual arrogance. "I'm resigning as your counsel." "You can't quit," Preston yelled. "We have to fight this. We counter-sue." "With what money, Preston?" Arthur snapped. "And on what grounds? You signed the divorce papers. You signed the prenup waiver. You signed the original merger agreement with the Clause 14 trap. She outplayed you at every single turn. And frankly, I don't want to be disbarred for defending a fraud. Good luck." The line went dead. Preston looked at the grey duffel bag. Inside, he found a change of clothes, a pair of sweatpants and a hoodie. He put them on. He looked in the cracked mirror of the motel bathroom. He looked exactly like the nobody he thought Isabella was when he met her. He realized then that he had never really known her. He had projected his own insecurities onto her. He thought she was small because he needed to feel big. But she had been holding back her power the entire time, trying to give him space to grow. And instead of growing, he had tried to crush her. He left the motel and walked to a nearby diner. He ordered a black coffee. He had $4 left. As he sat there, nursing the hot cup, a woman in a waitress uniform walked by. She looked tired, her hair frizzy from the humidity. A customer at another table was yelling at her about his eggs being cold. Preston watched. In the past, he would have sneered at the waitress. He would have judged her. But now, he saw something else. He saw the dignity in her silence as she took the plate back. He saw the patience. He thought of Isabella 5 years ago, serving him coffee. He thought of how she smiled when he left a big tip. He had thought he was saving her. "Refill?" the waitress asked, pulling him out of his trance. Preston looked up. "Please." "Rough night?" she asked, noting the dark circles under his eyes. "You could say that," Preston murmured. "I made a mistake, a really big mistake." "We all make 'em, honey," she said, pouring the coffee. "Question is, what do you do now?" What did he do now? Sterling Dynamics was gone. His reputation was incinerated. His friends, the fair-weather leeches like Tiffany, had vanished. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the only thing he had left from his old life, the expensive plastic pen he had used to sign the divorce papers. He looked at it. He realized Isabella had left him with exactly what he gave her. Nothing. But she had also left him with the truth. And the truth was, he had to start over. Not as a billionaire, not as a CEO, but as a man who had to learn for the first time the value of $1 and the cost of arrogance. High above him, cruising at 45,000 feet, Isabella sat in the window seat of the Global 7500. The sun was setting over the Atlantic, painting the clouds in hues of violet and gold. Sebastian sat opposite her. "The lawyers say the asset seizure is complete. We own the patent. The engineers say they can fix the battery floor in 6 months." "Good," Isabella said softly. "Are you happy, Bella?" Sebastian asked gently. Isabella turned away from the window. She didn't look triumphant. She looked peaceful. "I'm not happy that it had to happen this way, Sebastian. I loved him once. But I am happy that I can finally breathe. I'm happy that I don't have to hide who I am anymore." She picked up a paintbrush. On the table in front of her was a watercolor set. She dipped the brush in water and began to paint the sunset outside the window. "I'm just Isabella," she whispered, "and that is finally enough." 16 months had passed since the night the rain washed away Preston Sterling's life. The setting was Le Bourget Airport, Paris. It was the week of the Paris Air Show, the most prestigious aviation event in the world. The tarmac was a blistering grid of heat and aluminum, showcasing the future of flight. Fighter jets roared overhead, performing gravity-defying loops that rattled the champagne flutes in the VIP chalets. In the center of the exhibition stood the largest pavilion, a sleek structure of glass and white steel. Above the entrance, in massive silver letters, was the name, Titan Aviation. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of expensive lilies. Isabella Valenti stood at the podium. She looked different than she had in New York. The hardness that had defined her during the takeover had softened into a confident, unshakable serenity. She wore a cream-colored suit that screamed understated luxury, her hair pulled back in a chic chignon. Flashbulbs popped as she spoke into the microphone. Technological advancement isn't just about speed, Isabella told the gathered press, her voice steady and commanding. It is about sustainability and integrity. That is why I am proud to unveil the Titan Stirling EcoCell battery. We took a flawed concept, stripped it down to its core, and rebuilt it with safety as the priority. We didn't cut corners. We didn't hide data. We did the work. The crowd applauded. Beside her, Sebastian Cole clapped the loudest, looking at her with pride. Isabella continued, "This battery will power the next generation of medical relief drones. It will save lives in remote areas. It is no longer a tool for profit. It is a tool for humanity." Standing at the back of the room, holding a silver tray laden with empty crystal glasses, was a man in a black vest and white shirt. His name tag, slightly crooked, read Pierre. But the man wasn't French, and his name wasn't Pierre. It was Preston. He had aged 10 years in the last 16 months. His hair, once perfectly coiffed, was thinning and grey at the temples. The arrogance that had once defined his jawline was gone, replaced by the slack, hollow look of a man who had lost everything. After the collapse of Stirling Dynamics, Preston had been buried under an avalanche of lawsuits. The SEC investigation had barred him from holding any officer position in a public company. He had declared personal bankruptcy. His friends had blocked his number. Tiffany had sold her story to a tabloid for $10,000, painting him as a monster. He had fled to Europe, hoping to reinvent himself, but without money or references, he found that the only doors open to him were the service entrances. He got a job with a high-end catering company, serving the very people he used to dine with. He watched Isabella on the stage. She was radiant. She was powerful. She was everything he had told her she could never be. "Pierre, move it!" the catering manager hissed in his ear. "Table 4 needs more sparkling water." "Now!" Preston flinched. "Yes, chef, right away." He adjusted his grip on the tray and moved through the crowd. He kept his head down, terrified that someone might recognize him. But he needn't have worried. To these people, the billionaires, the tycoons, the power players, he was just furniture. He was invisible. He approached table 4. It was the center table, occupied by the Titan Aviation executive team. Preston's hands began to tremble. He saw Sebastian Cole laughing at a joke. He saw the German board members. And then he saw her. Isabella was sitting right there. She was laughing, her head thrown back, a genuine, joyful sound that Preston realized he had never heard during their marriage. In their marriage, she had been walking on eggshells. Here she was flying. He wanted to turn around. He wanted to run out of the pavilion, throw his apron in the trash, and disappear. But his feet were rooted to the spot. He had a job to do, and he needed this paycheck to cover his rent in the tiny studio apartment he shared with 2 students in the suburbs of Paris. He stepped forward. "Water for the table," he murmured, his voice raspy. He placed the fresh bottle on the white tablecloth. His hand shook so badly that the glass bottle clinked loudly against a saucer. Conversation at the table stopped. "Careful there," Sebastian said, not unkindly. He looked up at the waiter. Preston froze. He felt Sebastian's eyes narrowing, analyzing his face. The recognition was slow, then sudden. Sebastian's jaw tightened. He looked from the waiter to Isabella. Isabella turned her gaze toward the waiter. For a heartbeat, the noise of the air show outside faded away. The roar of the jets, the chatter of the crowd, the clinking of silverware. It all vanished into a vacuum of silence. Isabella looked at Preston. She saw the cheap uniform. She saw the lines of exhaustion around his eyes. She saw the fear. Preston waited for the humiliation. He expected her to point at him, to laugh, to tell the table, "Look, That's my ex-husband, the genius, who thought I was a gold digger. He braced himself for the final blow that would destroy whatever shred of dignity he had left. But Isabella didn't laugh. She didn't mock him. She didn't call security. Her expression softened. It wasn't pity. Isabella Valenti was done with pity. It was a distant, detached acknowledgement, like looking at an old photograph of a stranger you once knew. She reached out and steadied the trembling bottle he had placed on the table. "Thank you," she said softly. That was it. 2 words. She turned back to Sebastian and resumed her conversation about the new fuselage designs. She didn't dismiss him. She simply moved on. He was no longer a villain in her story. He was just a footnote. He was a background character who served water while she changed the world. The indifference was far more devastating than anger. If she had screamed at him, it would have meant he still mattered. It would have meant he still had power over her emotions. But her politeness proved that he was truly, utterly gone from her life. Preston backed away, his chest tight. He retreated to the kitchen area, pushing through the swinging doors. He leaned against the stainless steel counter, breathing hard. The sounds of the gala continued outside, a party he was no longer invited to. "You okay, Pierre?" a young dishwasher asked him. "You look like you saw a ghost." Preston closed his eyes. He thought about the rainy day in New York. He thought about the divorce papers. He thought about the woman he had called quaint. "No," Preston whispered, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead. "Not a ghost, just someone I used to know." He straightened his apron. "I have to get back out there. They need more champagne." Later that evening, as the sun set over Paris, painting the sky in streaks of purple and orange, Isabella walked toward her jet. The show was over. It had been a massive success. Titan aviation stock was at an all-time high. She paused at the bottom of the stairs to the Global 7500. Sebastian was waiting for her. "I saw him," Sebastian said quietly. "Preston." Isabella nodded, looking out at the horizon. "I saw him too. You could have had him fired, you know, or worse." "Why?" Isabella asked, turning to look at him. "He's paying for his choices, Sebastian. Every single day he has to wake up and be Preston Sterling. That is punishment enough." She took a deep breath of the cool evening air. "Besides," she added, a small smile playing on her lips, "I prefer to look up, not down." She ascended the stairs. The heavy door of the jet closed, sealing her in her sanctuary. Minutes later, the massive engines of the Global 7500 roared to life. The jet taxied down the runway, gathering speed. It lifted off effortlessly, climbing steep and fast, banking sharply over the city of lights. Down below, in the alley behind the exhibition hall, Preston was taking out the trash bags filled with lobster shells and empty champagne bottles. He heard the roar of the engines. He looked up, shielding his eyes from the setting sun. He watched the midnight blue jet climb higher and higher, a shining silver star shooting toward the stratosphere. He watched it until it was just a speck, until it disappeared into the clouds, leaving him behind on the cracked pavement, surrounded by the garbage of the life he used to live. He stood there for a long time, watching the empty sky. Then he picked up the next bag of trash, threw it into the dumpster, and went back inside to scrub the floors. And that is the story of Isabella and Preston. He thought he was discarding a burden, but he was actually throwing away a diamond. It's a brutal reminder that you should never judge someone by their current situation, because you never know who they really are, or who they're about to become. Preston learned the hard way that true class isn't about the suit you wear or the car you drive. It's about how you treat people when you think they have nothing to offer you. He chased the appearance of wealth and lost the reality of love. What would you have done if you were Isabella? Would you have been kind to him in that final moment? Or would you have taken revenge? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of karma and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. We have a massive werewolf romance drama coming up next week that you do not want to miss. Thanks for watching, and remember, be careful who you underestimate.